What's going on, everybody? It's your host, Dr. Splash. And today we have a really fun battle. It was brought to me by Dan. Dan has a really, his ear to the ground in the versus battle community. He said Superman versus Scarlet King. Super popular right now, okay? Heavy hitter from DC, heavy hitter from SCP. Hope versus Despair. We're going to cover it. If you love content like this, you want to see SCP return to the channel and continue to do so, make sure to smash the like button and let me know in the comment section down below what other topics you want to see covered as well. And if you want to see SCP show up as a universe that we can invade in the Invasion series, let me know as well in the comments if you want to see that be the case. As well as DC will be scaled and posted this week, just an updated scaling so it can be added to the Invasion series so you have further context to the universe characters are invading. Now, without further ado, we got all that covered. Let's jump right into this. Now, granted, these are two characters you could literally take all day examining and breaking down how complex and crazy their cosmologies are. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go real fast with it, and hopefully by the end of this video you have a rough idea of how each scales and why they scale so ridiculously high, okay? And we're in the interest of fair fade for Scarlet King and the likes of Superman. We will be taking them at their peak, okay? Story of the Superman, Scarlet King, how strong he got in his canon installment or whatever you want to call it in SCP. We're taking them at their peaks, okay? It's a fair fade. Now, where does Scarlet King scale? How does he stack up to the SCP cosmology? He was the only Elder God in his story that came from the abyss or the grand void that really had self. Among all his other Elder God siblings, none of them really understood what they are or what they could do. So even when he was a small Elder God, having that self-awareness allowed him to make major plays, okay? He's essentially the Elder God, the archetypal concept of shit's going wrong in the verse, right? Someone's being an asshole out there. Whether it is a little bully on a playground on Earth, or it is a higher meta-narrative demon, right? He's kind of the embodiment of making plays all the time, right? Just doing hood rat shit. And he took a vow after either subjugating or consuming his siblings that, he was going to pull up on creation, he was going to ruin everything, and he was going to burn the tree of knowledge, which is super important for the scaling. Now, the tree of knowledge, or Yggdrasil, which is, of course, a very popular name for these higher conceptual trees in fiction, it's the superstructure that contains the bare minimum high outer aspects of the SCP verse, including the Noosphere and the Wanderer's Library. Now, the reason that's important is that there's a very complex system of what we would call cosmic stacking within SCP verse, okay? A regular universe has arguments for infinite stacks of transcendences within it, of having narratives as well, being a part of space-times. What that means is, honestly, you have arguments for, hyperversal universes to even outer, in the sense of we have to call them a universe because it's basically a timeline, but that's a name fallacy. It's not just universal and scaling, okay? It's just the name we attribute to it to better understanding and conceptualize, okay? So you could argue a regular standard universe is outer to high outer, okay? Well, not high, I think that's a little harder to do, but outer, okay? And then you proceed to have infinite transcending stacks of those that endlessly goes on. That's what constitutes the multiverse. There's infinite multiverses at that endlessly go on, and then that's transcended endlessly. You have realms beyond that, and then that all could be considered like a branch on Yggdrasil. It's infinite, finite, everything in between, existing and non-existing, contained and not contained, dreams, imagination, all these things. They would be contained within the tree of knowledge. This scales above and contains ideas such as infinitely transcending universes, narrative-based existences, and higher forms of conceptual existence that meets all qualifiers for what we would consider outer to high outer. For perspective, that means at least one of the infinitesimal branches, like I said, is at least outer to high outer. All of the Elder Gods, after being consumed or subjugated by the Scarlet King, it makes sense that they gave him this power that would allow him to burn the tree, because they come from the abyss that would be beyond the tree. Now the serpent, the servant of God and the protector of the tree, could not conceive of how such a thing could rise from the abyss with the Almighty in existence. Like, why would that let such a thing come to be? And actually got cooked by Scarlet for attempting to engage early. Scarlet King and his forces destroyed the serpent and her allies, even burned the tree itself while stealing the tree of life. So yes, Scarlet King indeed, bare minimum, has high outer AP or attack potency. None stood before the Scarlet King, and eventually his meta death had to come in the form of him being jumped with meta death weapons, right? He also, by the way, endured a wipeout attempt from the Almighty. Now, it is important to note that this higher level death, that's absurdly broken, right? Like the Brothers Grimm in this verse, they have regular death, higher conceptual death, meta death, that would be beyond all things. Like it's levels and layers to death that bless these weapons. It's crazy. He is not unbeatable though. Obviously he did go down to the brothers in terms of their weaponry. But even his offspring are stated to be capable of surpassing him. He always feared that himself. And, beings like 999 are straight up capable of doing so and actually would surpass him not with despair, but with hope. Almighty is implied to have been having to step in, essentially, to use the word to stop Scarlet King. This is apparently the first time the word had been used and witnessed, and it was used to stop Scarlet, although at the time it did not permanently stop him. And again, the weapons used to drop him included being powered by great death and all death, beings that transcend meta, narrative, and religious deaths. So essentially, he's absurdly broken, scaling almost above majority of the cosmology, being able to even nuke the tree of knowledge. It's absurd what the Scarlet King is capable of, the true prince and king of despair. But when there is despair, hope must rise to meet it. But is it enough? Let's review the Superman side of this case, okay? Superman is someone we will be taking at their peak, similar to how we're taking Scarlet King at his peak. Now, when I say that for Superman, I'm talking about narratively what he represents in DC, which is why he's able to rise to the occasion in several crisis events. So let's look at what he's capable of at his best. I think the best way to look at it is when he flew through Phantom Stranger, a character who in the same run was going back and forth with the Spectre, who can walk through the source, even embody it if need to, can solo Olympus, can fly directly to heaven, even swapped hands with Michael the Archangel. Like, it's absurd what Spectre's capable of, okay? Phantom Stranger, his brother, can brawl with him. I say all that to say when Superman was serious, one shot flew through and broke Phantom Stranger on all levels, spiritual, meta, physical, all forms of existences, okay? And Phantom Stranger said, oh my God, like, Superman's literally the beacon of hope of DC. Like, everywhere he goes through, he's powered by everything. Like, essentially, if anything exists, if DC Comics exists, there's hope, right? The hopes of story, the hopes of tomorrow, the hopes of the future, the hopes of a hero, the first hero, Superman. Now, in terms of DC, you have to look at the cosmology and how strong it is to gain that appreciation for how strong the narrative of Superman is. After all, this is someone who blatantly, in a previous crisis, a character was using the Great Darkness, right? The Great Darkness being the power that goes against the presence, essentially. Now, in terms of looking at the cosmology and the grander landscape of new DC, you have regular universes, which even has the microverse, which has like infinite layers within it. It has some, the microverse can be extended and does have storms capable of scaling to the infinite universe as well. The standard universe, it's too vast to scale. It can go beyond the laws of logic. Like the microverse itself, which is literally minuscule compared to the regular DC universe, has arguments for, multiversal. And then you get to the regular universe, which has infinite stacks upon it as well. And then you have infinite timelines and realities spread throughout. You then have the infinite multiverse that has infinite variations or infinite multiverses as well. You branch out to the higher realms at that point, which includes realms of stories, non-stories, and everything in between. but obviously there is higher levels of existence, right? In terms of higher levels of time, higher levels of death, higher levels of story, just like SCP has. For example, Limbo is not above the dreaming, with the dreaming having stories told, not told, will be told, or never will be told. Every form of fiction, non-fiction, real-world stories, mythologies, religions, they would all come from here. There's several layers beyond that, as well as the source, which in comparison to everything below, and which we could also include the dreaming if we want to, it's distanceless, it's shapeless, it's formless, it's timeless in comparison to all things below it in a transcendental sense. There's several layers and several forms of cosmic stacking within DC to easily get it into that high outer conversation, to even the boundless conversation, similar to how you can do with SCP, okay? That's important to note because the story of Superman is one of the, if not the strongest narrative in DC. In fact, the dream, when discussing this with another demon, they were talked about nothingness, like the oblivion, the end of all things, right? Ultimate despair. What's the combat to that? What neutralizes that? Hope. We look at Pariah, who used the Great Darkness, who, like I said, by proxy of scaling above all things I just mentioned, would at least be high outer to boundless, right? Well, the Great Darkness, in comparison, Pariah said the power of hope is more impressive, okay? A character who goes outside the omniverse and goes all across fiction and non to chronicle it, states this universe, hope, the power within it. It's as unique, as beautiful as anything he's ever seen, right? It's as crazy as it gets. The Great Darkness was dispelled by this power of hope when Superman rose up, okay? It's stated by Worldforger that essentially every form of existence that happens in DC comes down to either the narrative of Superman or the narrative of Batman. It was stated that Superman, theoretically, if he goes all out by Time Trapper, who sees hypertime, all these forms, above stories, all these things, he states straight up that he could go beyond God. He could go beyond what we call presence, obviously, and above the designs of presence if he was to be killed by the strongest form of Superman. That would free him from even God's plan. It would go beyond Superman itself. It would go beyond God itself, okay? Like that, to do that, to be granted that death by Superman would go beyond the present. That's how strong the power of hope can get. The hope to even surpass presence. Like if you really thinking about it on a meta conceptual level, it's crazy what Superman both has accomplished at his peak and what the story of Superman represents. The hope of DC Comics, the true foundation. Now, if these two were to clash, hope versus despair, how do I see this playing out? Well, for one, I think this conversation is tainted by both sides more or less downplaying each other, right? Either DC fans are saying SCP's a bullshit verse and it gets stomped, or SCP fans are saying nothing scales to even a toenail in SCP, so GG for everything. I think it's a lot more complex of a situation than that. I think both verses have evidence for high outer to even boundless, if you want to get into those crazy wonky nerd conversations, but bare minimum, super high end scaling. Now, this is how I ultimately viewed this. If we're taking story of Superman at its highest conceptual level, and we're taking Scarlet King right before he suffered death by great all death, right? Sent back to the abyss. Ultimate agent of despair. I think in this clash, Superman does possess the capability of stopping Scarlet King, right? Would he grant him true death? Potentially, like Time Trapper said. Even allow him, perhaps, to go beyond his original plan or purpose. He possibly could grant that in a way through the power of hope and what that's capable of doing, as Time Trapper has said. And straight up, it's stated one of the ways to beat Scarlet King would come from his son growing up and using the power of hope to overcome despair. So even in SCP, narratively, that's how that works as well. So I think it's a two-pronged conversation, though. I think both easily have high-end scaling. I think Scarlet King is cooler on paper, like has more tricks, but I think conceptually what they both represent on a meta-narrative level, I think the hope is going to be a little more than the despair here. However, I will fully acknowledge If we were to do like a composite Scarlet King where we like go look at every story ever written on him, and then we merge cosmologies from other stories and other takes on the verse and stuff like that, and other takes on the character in general, other iterations, probably does beat Superman. I think there's some situation where there's another cosmology and story out there outside of the main timeline or main story or main canon that makes the tree of knowledge look like infinitesimally smaller compared to another tree way out there in a different type of story. So if you want to see me explore the entirety of Scarlet King, all the alternate showings, all those things, let me know in the comment section down below. I'd do a definitive scale on him. But thank you guys so much for watching. That's my interpretation. I think mainline Scarlet King probably loses to the story of Superman, as the story of Hope should be a weakness, and they both have the high-end scaling to kind of measure out to that point where they can hurt each other. So I do think at that point I'd favor Hope, but I acknowledge if you composite everything for Scarlet King and read through everything else, he probably cooks. But anyways, guys, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I had a lot of fun giving my take on this battle, and let me know what you think of my answer. But yeah, I had a lot of fun doing this. It's been your host, Dr. Splash, and remember, it's Yancey Street, bitches.